West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Threats and harassment like that have become a regular occurrence for election workers and election officials all across the United States. And like Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, that means a lot of them just choose not to return to their jobs. The Brennan Center for Justice polled election officials across the country and found that turnover is so high that when the 2024 election comes around, more than 20% of local election officials may have to be new recruits. That's people who have never administered presidential elections before. In key swing states, the effect of these election lies and accusations of fraud was even more acute. Last year, the Boston Globe actually quantified it. In Michigan, nearly 27% of county-level election officials have left their posts. In Wisconsin, 30% are gone. In Georgia, 36% have quit. In Arizona, 37% are gone. And in Pennsylvania, 39% are no longer on the job. Almost 40% of county election officials in the state that determine the final outcome of the 2020 presidential election, almost 40% of them have quit. That is the toll taken by these lies. So thank you, Mr. Giuliani, for kind of sort of maybe admitting that you lied, but just in court to move a case along and not in real life. The damage quite clearly has been done. So how do we as a country clean up this mess? Joining me now is the Secretary of State of Michigan, Jocelyn Benson, the chief elections official for that state. Secretary Benson, thank you so much for being here. I would like to get your first, your reaction to this. I think we can call it a concession on the part of Mr. Giuliani that these claims about these two election workers were baseless.
I don't even know if I'd go so far as to say it's a concession, because of the way outside of the court documents, he continued to walk back what he said. But none of his capitulations or dancing in this moment or any other changes the reality and the history that he and others lied about an election, causing dire consequences to the lives of professional election administrators in the process. I mean, people showed up outside my home 3 days after Mayor Giuliani, Rudy Giuliani, had showed up at our state capitol in Lansing, telling lies about our elections. Shay and Ruby Moss, amazing women, represent the stories of so many untold election workers who have left their jobs because of these threats that come in many ways from these very loud voices and continue to do so. So the question is, will there be consequences for the violence and the threats that grew out of these lies? I certainly hope so. But we, as my colleague Gabe Sterling said, almost 3 years ago, this needs to stop. Also, we need to stop seeing Mike Lindell and so many others out there, including presidential candidates and U.S. senators, spreading these lies to further political gain. because it has real life consequences to the men and women whose job it is to make democracy work for everyone.
Yeah, on that note, it's not just Giuliani and Trump, right? It's not limited to an administration that's intent on clinging to power. This is now the de facto position of the Republican Party to suggest that there was fraud in the 2020 election and could be in future elections. This is the position of presidential candidates. No one is out there telling the truth. And so I wonder, given as we are on the precipice of a potential federal indictment of the former president on January 6 charges or charges to interfere with the 2020 election, do you think that can have the effect that it potentially needs to have, which is an ameliorative effect to reverse the decay, the rot that has penetrated some of these institutions in terms of public confidence? Do you think the toothpaste, for lack of a better metaphor, can be put back in the tube?
Well, I think two things will result. I mean, certainly the accountability is a really important affirmation of the truth. When we were going through all of this in the fall of 2020, I remember the days in which we were up against the federal government. The president of the United States was coming after us, it felt, and his most ardent supporters for just doing our jobs and doing nothing wrong. We couldn't help the fact that he lost a presidential election. Our job was just to make sure everyone could vote and then tell the truth. And so we always had these moments, my team, where we sort of recognized, we may lose this battle over democracy in this moment. We may lose it in the future, and that's real. But the courts are the ones that held the line and demanded truth be told. And that's why this concession today or last night is so critical. It shows that you can't lie in the court of law. You can perhaps lie outside the Four Seasons gardening arena or wherever that press conference was meant to be held, but you can't lie in a court of law. And so the more we see legal cases brought forward, pushing for the truth, whether it's criminal charges or defamation charges, that helps us get to a point where we have an official affirmation of what is fact and what is false. And the other thing I'll just mention, what I've lived through as we've seen this unfold these last 3 years, is at the same time we've seen pain in our democracy, people losing their jobs, people walking away from the work. We've also seen an influx of so many Americans on both sides of the aisle who know the truth, who know the courage that it took to defend the truth, and are standing with us, serving as election workers, volunteering as poll workers for future elections because they believe in the process. And that, in many ways, gives me hope that we can emerge from this moment with a stronger elections process than ever before.
Well, on that note, I mean, I guess, does it worry you that up to a fifth of election workers in the 2024 presidential race may be new, that they will have had no administrative experience in what is sure to be a contested election, or at least a very fraught election, given the position of one of the leading candidates?
Yes, certainly. That turnover is concerning, but it also provides us with an opportunity to recognize that over half of those election officials who lived through 2020 will be back again in 2024. And we are ready, wizened, and strengthened, determined to protect the process and train those who are coming in as new election officials to be proud of this work, to stand with the truth and the will of the people, whatever it may be. So we have kind of gone through these last few years here in Michigan, learning how to take these challenges and making them opportunities. And I think that's what you'll see, I believe, unfold in 2024 if Americans all across the country join with us and stand up to be part of the process and speak the truth and push back against the lies.
I mean, I think a lot of people appreciate the optimism of, your position, which is that people are flooding the zone, as it were. When democracy is being threatened, people aren't averting their eyes. They're coming and they're raising their hands to volunteer to help save it. On that note, in a more sort of craven chapter of strengthening democracy, the Republican Party appears to understand that it is not good electoral politics to turn people off of early voting, mail-in voting, absentee balloting, and the RNC is launching a new campaign featuring Donald Trump, of all people, urging Republicans to vote early. That's not the same thing as Donald Trump saying, look, the 2020 election wasn't stolen, but it is something. And I guess I wonder, A, what you make of that, and B, if you're at all optimistic that Donald Trump somehow can encourage people to come back home again to the institutions that we've set up that are thus far unparalleled in terms of their integrity.
Well, look, I want everyone everywhere to take advantage of all the options they have to vote in their states and their communities. Look at the one that is open and most convenient for you, and no matter where you live or who you vote for, participate in democracy. And as far as the former president and others now embracing early voting, great. I'd like to see him also talk about how secure it is, how secure ballot drop boxes are, how we can trust the results of the election. Let's take that one step further. So you're not just endorsing the process, but overriding the past lies by telling the truth about the security of our elections and the security of early voting and the reliability of our machines and the results in a paper ballot election. If we see that, then I'll have more cause for optimism. But also we have to remember that it's neighbors and everyday citizens that can be the arbiters of truth and the truth tellers in their communities, even if we don't get that from candidates and politicians. So it's incumbent again upon all of us to learn the facts and truth about our elections and spread that to our neighbors, to our fellow parishioners, to our colleagues all around the country. And if we can do that as citizens, then we can fight back against the lies together.
It is Thursday, the 27th of July of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya. A little bit of spice in your life, just a little, okay? All right, so how are you? Sad news to relay. I'm sure that you've heard that Sinead O'Connor passed at the age of 56. Constables in the area there where she passed have reported that there's no foul play suspected, meaning that that also means they don't think that she took her own life. So 56 is a terribly young age to pass on from this plane of existence. But so it goes in this plane of existence, huh? Yeah, I always felt sorry for Sinead and all the BS that she got put through. And all these decades later, she was proved correct. And so I take, the beatification of Lorne Michaels with a grain of salt because of how he treated Sinead O'Connor. And I got to tell you, there was a lot of people that jumped on the bandwagon, including Madonna, making fun of Sinead O'Connor ripping up a picture of the Pope. So, one wonders. One does. But that's why we were punks and not glams. So there. Anyway, she had a beautiful voice. She was true to her cause, and her cause was just. Where we have now these QAnon freaks and the people promoting this movie, The Sound of Freedom, and they all turn out to be pedophiles. Uh-huh. And Sinead O'Connor did more to save children from the clutches of a pedophile cabal than any of these so-called saviors had or have. And it turns out they're all creeps. Every single one of them. Stay away. All right, so what else do we have? Oh, grand jurors, I noticed before I had to lock myself in the proverbial bubble here at the mothership, had been arriving at the courthouse in D.C., and that may not bode well, because a lot of people are thinking today's indictment day. I don't know. They might issue the indictment today. Or they might wait till tomorrow, when they can get out of town and have a little bit of a security blanket, a little bit of a head start before the shit comes down on them, because that's what's going to happen. Somehow, the parties involved will be doxxed, and all hell will descend upon them and their families, their friends. And we have to put up with this constant harangue on social media and cable TV and regular TV every hour on the hour about how Joe has weaponized the government. Okay. So it turns out the Justice Department lawyers, the ones that were allowed to stay on from the Trump administration to investigate Hunter, Joe, his dad, said, it would look improper for me to change out these lawyers. They'll just have to finish the job. And so in the midst of trying to finish the job, they tried to put a fast one over a judge who was appointed by H.W. Bush. And I'm not saying H.W. Bush was a good guy, but we have to make those designations now. They thought they were going to get in there, it's all going to go great, and they were going to be able to Benghazi this guy. Turns out that a lot of legal analysts believed that Trump's proclamations that he was going to weaponize his DOJ when he takes over and go after the Bidens, that's what tanked that deal. The judge was aware of that. Initially, I have to say, I kind of dissed on the judge, because it looked like it was a delaying tactic. What MAGA wants, MAGA gets, and it turns out MAGA wanted something, and she said, this is all untoward. First of all, these charges you're bringing to me, we never see in federal court. And then, as an aside, you and I have to put up with the constant harangue by MAGA and all of their minions that there's a two-tier justice system, and Hunter Biden's getting all the breaks. What? I don't even remember much about the trial of the Trump kids when they were adjudicated to never be able to run a charity again because of their fraudulent activities bordering on racketeering. Do you remember that trial? Do you remember the constant news breaking about it? Who entered and who exited the courthouse that day? Not one whit. No discussion about whether they would be thrown in jail over a civil charge, but this is criminal, apparently. Misdemeanor. We're already hearing from all the usual suspects who tried to violently overthrow the United States of America and who are now part of the elected class, which makes them insurgents by definition, calling for Hunter Biden to be thrown behind bars for misdemeanors. Trump said that he wanted Biden impeached, and now we hear all this BS about they're going to impeach Biden. Donald Trump is on the record, on tape, saying that don't worry about it to his weaponized DOJ. Just say that you question it, and I got my allies in the Congress. We call those accomplices to a crime, by the way. And every time you hear any MAGA repug go to a podium defending Trump in any way, they are accomplices to a crime. We're not even talking about the NRA Russian rubles that got laundered by the NRA, passed out by Maria Butina and others. They're all tainted with the stink. And they know it. They do. All right, what do we have in store for you here? For the rest of this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as we mill about in the bistro cafe of such said establishment. Well, at the top, MAGA lies and physical intimidation have driven election workers from their jobs in every state of the union. But Trump's big lie has hit a brick wall in court. Thankfully. Let's see if it holds up. No wonder Netanyahu and Trump want to destroy our legal system. Yeah. On the rest of the menu, 22 attorneys general oppose the 3M company settlement over public water systems contaminated with their forever chemicals. High superintendent turnover means many Oregon school districts are led by inexperienced newcomers. And they're being run out of their jobs by you-know-who. Yeah. And Lockheed Martin won the NASA contract to build a nuclear thermal rocket engine, a key technology that could dramatically speed up space travel and help humans get to Mars, where they will be irradiated by a constant stream of cosmic energy, not even blocked by one bit of atmosphere because there isn't any. Well, there's a little, just not enough. And they have no magnetosphere. Why are we going to Mars? Well, apparently just to show that we can. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a prominent Belarusian journalist was sentenced to 6 years in prison for reporting on the opposition. And the British billionaire owner of the English soccer team, Tottenham Hotspur, has been indicted in New York on charges of, quote, orchestrating a brazen insider trading scheme, end quote. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so, and everything else as well. Across the page to the left from that said chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help, especially now. The bills keep going up and outlays of money have to be outlaid, and your generosity has helped us continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for over a dozen years now. If you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, that helps, because other like-minded folk have done the same, and there you go. We've discovered over these many years that if you pay your bills, you can pretty much fly under the radar, because that's the kind of technology they have. And we are just more than willing to utilize it as we can. Anyway, thank you for your generosity. And thank you for future generosity in the future. Because we found out that we're going to have to be resisting for a while longer now, won't we? Darn it. Oh, well. Thank you anyway. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, I guess that's what it... We're going to keep calling it Twitter. X? Give me that break. Anyway, if you want to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter or whatever it is, and certainly on Mastodon and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a hell of a lot more. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter or whatever it is. Also on Mastodon, Spoutable, and now Blue Sky. You can follow me at Justice Putnam on all those platforms, and I post the show notes and links diary. It's a diary, not story. Diary. on Daily Goes 10 minutes before showtime. And if actually, I would suggest that you look for those links in the show notes, because that's where the real reportage is. And you can find the show notes and links diary linked up on my social media feeds. There it is. You can also follow the show on Twitter, or whatever that thing is, at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, just not Stitcher anymore because Sirius XM sucks. All right, got that off my chest. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by John Flesher from the Associated Press. 22 attorneys general urged a federal court yesterday, Wednesday, to reject a proposed $10.3 billion settlement over contamination of U.S. public drinking water systems with potentially dangerous chemicals, saying it lets manufacturer 3M Company off too easily. The deal, announced in June, does not give individual water suppliers enough time to determine how much money they would get and whether it would cover their costs of removing the compounds known collectively as PFAS, said the officials with 19 states, Washington, D.C., and 2 territories. In some cases, the agreement could shift liability from the company to providers, they said. While I appreciate the effort that went into it, the proposed settlement in its current form does not adequately account for the pernicious damage that 3M has done in so many of our communities, said California Attorney General Rob Bonta, leader of the multi-state coalition. 3M spokesman Sean Lynch said the agreement will benefit U.S.-based public water systems nationwide that provide drinking water to a vast majority of Americans without further litigation. The company, based in St. Paul, Minnesota, manufactures PFAS, a broad class of chemicals used in non-stick, water, and grease-resistant products, such as clothing and cookware, as well as some firefighting foams, described as forever chemicals because they don't degrade naturally in the environment. PFAS has been linked to a variety of health problems, including liver and immune system damage and some cancers. 3M said it plans to stop making them by the end of 2025. Some 300 communities have sued 3M and other companies over water pollution from the compounds. A number of states, airports, firefighter training facilities, and private well owners also have pending cases. Here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays, is by staff at the Oregonian. Nearly one-third of Oregon's 197 school districts have superintendents in their first or second year on the job, including 2 of the largest, Salem-Keizer and Hillsborough, according to the Coalition of Oregon School Administrators. Some turnover is natural, as with Mike Scott's retirement after 14 years at the helm in Hillsborough, but Oregon districts hit 3 successive record highs in the number of newly hired superintendents after the pandemic hit. 31 in the fall of 2020, 34 in the fall of 2021, and an astounding 41 in the fall of 2022, according to the school administrators group. The job has become more contentious in the past few years as school leaders grapple with the continuing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and face tensions with their school boards, Oregon Public Broadcasting reported. 60 Oregon districts have superintendents in the first or second year of the job. 25 districts will have new superintendents this year. And 3 tiny school districts, Nisa, Jordan Valley, and Oak Ridge, plus medium-sized Crook County, were still seeking a superintendent as of this week. Christian Davenport of the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Lockheed Martin won a contract to build a nuclear thermal rocket engine, a key technology long coveted by both NASA and the Pentagon that could dramatically speed up space travel and help humans get to Mars. Under the contract, issued by NASA and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, known as DARPA, the Defense Department unit that seeks to develop transformative technologies, Lockheed Martin will work to first fly the engine by 2027. If the company meets all the milestones, including the test flight, it will receive nearly $500 million, with half coming from NASA and half from DARPA. NASA is keenly interested in nuclear thermal power for missions to Mars. Using today's chemically fueled rockets, flights to the Red Planet could take 7 months or more, potentially exposing astronauts to long periods of radiation. Having humans cooped up in confined spaces for months could also lead to mental health problems and disagreements among crew members. One of the main challenges of sending humans to Mars is the great distance between the planets. Earth and Mars are only on the same side of the sun every 26 months, but even at their closest points, a spacecraft aiming for Mars would have to follow a long elliptical orbit around the sun totaling hundreds of millions of miles. In a statement, NASA said that nuclear propulsion is a key capability on NASA's roadmap to send astronauts to Mars. A nuclear-powered rocket would enable faster trips to the Red Planet, making missions less complex and safer for crew. This type of engine requires significantly less propellant than chemical rockets, so missions would be able to carry additional scientific equipment. Let's hope it's scientific and not military, because you know how they like to work. All right, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Process, AI protection, and fair compensation.
I'm sure you know what that is.
Yeah, for the first time since the 1960s, both Hollywood actors and writers are on strike.
Now, striking Hollywood actors hold their largest demonstration to date, and it happened in Times Square.
At the same time. Then and now, the problem is about technology disrupting the world of Hollywood.
And the question of whether actors and writers are being paid fairly.
We need to come to the table, but we need to come to the table in good faith.
In the 1960s, the technology was television.
They call him Flipper, faster than light.
Today, it's streaming platforms, but also the rise of powerful new artificial intelligence models.
Generative AI can make it way easier to use a performer's likeness or voice without having that person there at all. And in that case, who gets to profit from the performance?
This is Tech Quickly, the digital double of Scientific American's Science Quickly podcast. I'm Sophie Bushwick, tech editor at Scientific American.
And I'm Tulika Bose, senior multimedia editor. So, Sophie, I actually kind of spoke to a few actor friends about what's happening right now and why people are striking.
I get the impression that some people are worried that they're going to be losing their jobs to an AI.
The worst case scenario would be there's no more extra work, which is just like such a useful thing for a lot of like working actors, like even non-speaking roles, extra work, like that's money. And if you can just AI generate a crowd and it doesn't look unrealistic, the thought of that is very scary.
That's my friend Wolfgang Hunter, an actor, comic, and writer in New York City who has written for shows like Mr. Beast.
Dude, I love the Midwest. Even like the heckles are just like nice, concerned noises. Like, oh, don't say that, man. Believe in yourself.
A lot of actors, even if you've seen them before, need to do everything they can to pay the bills.
So it's scary to think that if you sign a waiver, you could just like be never getting work again, even as like an extra.
So, Sophie, didn't you speak to someone about this too?
That's right. I spoke with Hani Farid, a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, who studies this type of technology. He says this idea that generative AI can take an actor's image and insert it into any scene is just putting a new name on existing tech.
We used to call it deepfakes, which was scary sounding and was largely associated with things like non-consensual sexual imagery and fraud and disinformation. Somebody in the industry did some very good rebranding, and now we call it generative AI, which sounds less scary and less awful. It is the same core underlying technology.
I tend to associate deepfakes with video, but generative AI can also be used to make still images, text, music, and other audio.
And this is also kind of worrying for actors who also rely on voice work.
Definitely what's on the line right now is reoccurring work. So especially with like voice acting and stuff like that, AI can't like generate a new voice or a new character, but it can mimic existing ones, you know?
So this character that Wolfgang voices, for example,
The Little Mermaid. Yeah, I don't listen to hip hop.
Could be easily sampled and replaced, right?
Exactly. And Hani talked about how easy this is with modern AI tools.
If I, for example, Sophie, record 2 minutes of your voice, just 2 minutes, nothing sophisticated, just on this call right now, I can go over to a commercial website and for $5 a month, I can clone your voice and I can now type and have you say anything I want you to say.
Of course, my voice clone might sound more realistic if the AI developers gave it more clips of my voice. In general, the more data you can provide, the more realistic the digital double will look or sound.
Ooh, digital double, kind of creepy.
Very creepy.
With a single image, I can insert somebody's likeness into a video, but because I've only got one view of them, it's going to be a little glitchy and it will not hold up to Hollywood style. It's fine for TikTok and YouTube, but it's not going to pass muster for Hollywood.
The technology might get better eventually, but for now, actors have to go through something called the orb.
Okay. So technically, it's called a photogrammetry stage. But a video game actor who has performed on one of these stages and who asked to remain anonymous described it as the orb when he spoke to our tech reporting fellow, Lauren Leffer.
Very science fictional.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to quote Lauren directly here. Inside the orb, the world is reduced to a sphere of white light and flashes. Outside the orb's metallic skeletal frame is darkness. Imagine you are strapped into a chair inside this contraption. A voice from the darkness suggests expressions, ways to pose your mouth and eyebrows, scenarios to react to, phrases to say, and emotions to embody. At irregular intervals, the voice also tells you not to worry and warns that more flashes are coming soon.
Well, that sounds freaking terrifying.
Yeah, it does not seem like a pleasant experience. But if you're a working actor, you have to put up with a lot of stuff like that for the job. And on the one hand, AI is making it way easier to duplicate an actor's image even without the orb, which just kind of ramps up the pressure for performers to sign away their images.
You know, I am like such a guy that has such a bad habit of just signing something and not reading it. Yeah, absolutely, whatever. Yeah, camera's right there. Yeah, it's the closest thing I think we've actually had to selling your soul.
So one goal of the strike is for actors to protect themselves from having to sell their image, or to make sure that if their digital double is going to show up in a bunch of future media, that they'll be fairly compensated for that.
And it's not just their own digital doubles that actors need protection from. Remember how Wolfgang said AI can't generate a new character?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I don't know about audio-only characters, but AI can absolutely generate images of humans who have never existed.
I can now just whole cloth create the next generation of performers. So that's not a replacement, that's a creation. I can decide, look, we're going to do market research. And we're going to say, well, you know, a blend between George Clooney and Brad Pitt and fill in your favorite actors there. Is, you know, so maybe you create this sort of this chimera, right? This hybrid.
Or say Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah, Jenna's hog tight.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll see you at the Deuce or something, huh?
Sure. See you at the Deuce.
And if you have an AI-generated fake actor, it can be customized to different markets. Maybe there's one version designed to appeal to Americans.
Another version for the Middle East, another one for Chinese markets, and so on and so on.
So the studios, they may not even need performers. These things can be created whole cloth. So it's not even a replacement anymore. It's something different.
Okay, yeah, this is a lot worse than we thought.
I understand why actors are striking. But also, if the studios do want to go all in on AI, then sure, they might be able to cut out some of the humans in front of the camera. They might be able to save some money. But it could also majorly backfire for them.
If this technology really gets good, where I can go to ChatGPT and say, please write me a movie script with this storyline and this sort of themes, and then I can synthesize the voices of the characters and synthesize the videos and do all of that on my laptop. Do we democratize access to filmmaking? It's an interesting question. Maybe it's not going to be Hollywood studios. Right now, the performers are scared for their jobs, and I think they have the right to be. But what if the studios should be fearful? What if the very studios that are jamming up the performers, what if they're next?
Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Talika Bose, Kelso Harper, and Corinne Leong. Our show is edited by Ella Fetter and Alexa Lim. Our theme music was composed by Dominic Smith.
Don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. For more in-depth science news and features, go to scientificamerican.com. And if you like the show, give us a rating or review.
For Scientific American's Science Quickly, I'm Sophie Bushwick.
I'm Talika Bose. See you next time.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Arthritis is common among veterans. Traumatic and overuse injuries during active duty are risk factors for developing arthritis. Fortunately, there are low-cost or no-cost strategies that can help veterans manage arthritis. Physical activity can reduce pain and improve function. It can also help improve mood and play a role in managing other chronic conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. You can do low-impact activities, such as walking, biking, swimming, and water aerobics, all good forms of exercise. Arthritis-specific classes can help you get started. Information on classes, exercise programs, and tools are available at cdc.gov/arthritis. These resources can help reduce pain and improve function. Learning self-management techniques can help all veterans become more active, improve their overall quality of life, and thrive.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Ready for our little forest adventure?
Yes! So much waiting for me. Yeah, I wanna go outside. I wanna be.
We're here.
Whoa, that was fast.
There's a forest closer than you think. Find a park or forest near you and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by USDA Forest Service and the Ad Council.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes, their age, the way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table?
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. Labor leader Mother Mary Harris Jones was leading a march of children laborers to President Theodore Roosevelt's summer home in New York. The long march had began 20 days before in Philadelphia. Mother Jones was hoping to draw national attention to the plight of child workers. The action caught the public's attention, and across the nation, newspapers reported on the March of the Mill Children. All the way in Leadville, a town town in the mountains of Colorado west of Denver, the Herald-Democrat carried the story of Mother Jones's East Coast March. The paper's July 27th article began, quote, "It is a pathetic spectacle. That little army of Mother Jones, marching through the broiling heat of summer, lay a petition before the president. She says truly that her errand is as vital as any which takes persons to Oyster Bay. She comes to please the cause of the child laborers, and to emphasize her protest, has with her several score of ill-clad, puny children, the result of the enforced work of these children in factories. When the children's march reached the president's door 2 days later, the president was not there to meet them. Yet the march had sparked national attention. In 1904, the National Child Labor Committee formed to take action on the issue. Pennsylvania passed tougher child labor restrictions the next year, but federal protections would have to wait until the next President Roosevelt. The passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938, signed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, finally included nationwide limits to child labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs only in the upper 80s. Plenty of sunshine with winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight, lows in the mid to upper 50s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. And mainly sunny skies tomorrow with highs near 90. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen is rated as moderate in our little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 27 parts per million, though we remain under an air quality alert for the rest of the day and tomorrow because of shifting winds from the wildfires. The daytime UV index is very high at level 9, and barometric pressure is falling at 30.09 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is drying out. We are now standing at 58%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that's the Weather Underground. London is 70 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 65 degrees with rain. Rome is 87 and sunny. Kyiv is 66 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 76 and clear. Hong Kong is 84 and fair. Tokyo is 82 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 48 and clear. San Francisco, California is 56 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 91 degrees Fahrenheit sunny. And you have a high heat warning. So take care. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Caramano of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A prominent journalist in Belarus was sentenced yesterday, Wednesday, to 6 years in prison, the latest step in a years-long crackdown on opposition figures, independent journalists, and human rights activists. On trial in the city of Grodno in western Belarus, Pavel Masheka, age 45, was found guilty of complicity in extremist activity for covering the activities of the political opposition. He was accused of working for news outlets including Belsat TV, which broadcasts in Belarusian from its base in neighboring Poland. The Belarusian authorities have labeled Belsat as extremist. Lawyer Yulia Uralevich also was sentenced to 6 years in prison after she was accused of giving Mazeke information on Belarus's political prisoners, notably on dissident artist Ales Pushkin, who died in a Belarusian prison earlier this month. Yulevich, age 42, who practiced law for almost 18 years and defended human rights activists, was stripped of her license in February of 2022. Mazeka is a well-known figure in Belarus. In 2002, he was sentenced to 2 years in jail for slandering the president before becoming press secretary for presidential candidate Milinovic in 2006. The lawyer, Mazeka, has since worked for leading independent news outlets in both Belarus and Poland, hosting several shows and acting as executive director for Belsat TV. The journalist has spent 11 months earlier behind bars since his arrest in August 2022. Earlier, he said that during his detention he was severely beaten by law enforcement officers and accused them of trying to gouge out his eye. Journalists and activists in Belarus have faced large-scale repression since the August 2020 vote that handed a sixth term to Lukashenko following the election, which was rejected as fraudulent by opposition and the West. Belarus was swept by massive protests, some of which drew more than 100,000 people.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Andrew Zhang of the Washington Post brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Joe Lewis, the 86-year-old British billionaire and owner of the English soccer team Tottenham Hotspur, has been indicted in New York on charges of orchestrating a brazen insider trading scheme, U.S. officials said late on Tuesday. Lewis abused access to corporate boardrooms by providing inside info to romantic partners, his personal assistants, his private pilots, and friends. Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, said in a video posted on Twitter, the site now known as X. Those folks then traded on that inside info and made millions of dollars on the stock market, Williams said, because thanks to Lewis, those bets were a sure thing. Lewis faces 19 counts, including securities fraud, with each count carrying a maximum prison term of between 5 and 25 years. David M. Zorno, an attorney for Lewis, said in a short statement that the U.S. government had made an egregious error in judgment in charging Mr. Lewis, and that Lewis has come to the United States voluntarily to answer these ill-conceived charges. The Tavistock Group, an investment organization principally owned by Lewis, could not be reached for comment. In an emailed response to questions about the case, Tottenham Hotspur, the London team owned by Lewis, described the allegations against Lewis as a legal matter unconnected with the club. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.